Okay. Hey, Fandom, we're back. Thanks for taking the time to join us here. We appreciate you watching the show. And Panther fans, I promise you're going to enjoy the show this week. And before I go ahead and introduce our guest, I just want to ask you to click the subscribe button and click the bell. We're a live video podcast, and if you click the bell, it'll send a notification letting you know whenever we are live. So, having said that, thanks again, and let me introduce to you. I'm excited to introduce you here to Edgar Salmingo Jr., who joins us this week. You may know him as Panthers analyst on Twitter. And Edgar, welcome to the show. I mean, we've talked a long time. This is the first time meeting you, so I'm thrilled to have you on. I'm excited to talk Panthers. How are you doing here this evening?
I'm good. I feel like we've been Twitter friends for a long time, so this is my first time kind of meeting you face to face. Actually, this is the first time I've ever been on a radio show or a podcast where this is like my face is being shown. So it's good to meet everybody out there, but also good to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just kind of want to, for myself, I'd like to know a little bit more about you, but also so that our fans can also kind of get an idea of who you are. So explain a little bit about the work that you do that involves the Panthers.
Sure. So I started off, so I know this is going to be wrapped into one big story, but I'm from Los Angeles. When I started liking football in the 90s, Los Angeles didn't have a team. And so I fell in love with a team that just started. I was like, well, let me just pick a team. And I didn't want to be a bandwagon fan when there was Cowboys fans and Steelers fans and 49ers fans out here. And so I picked a new team that had cool colors, that had cool uniforms. Nobody could call me a bandwagon fan, so I started from the beginning. I guess earlier back, the 2010s, I found Panthers fans on the internet. So like there's none out here in Los Angeles, at least not, there's more now, but back then there wasn't any. And I just fell in love with, going on Twitter. I started writing for SB Nation for Cat Scratch Reader, which is so much fun, and writing recaps for games. Moved on to the USA Today for Panthers Wire for a little bit. And now I just kind of taking a break, just kind of going on Twitter, hoping to do some more video, but focusing on my family. I'm trying to finish up a doctoral program, but love to get back into doing Carolina stuff, Panther stuff when I have a free time.
Well, that's awesome, and we appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight and your knowledge with us. Now, I have to ask, what's it like being a Panthers fan in Los Angeles? That kind of seems like Panthers fans are kind of. I don't want to say they're only localized in the Carolinas, but obviously, that's a big portion, and you don't necessarily see them, across the country like that, especially in LA. But what's that like? Is there a place where you watch the games? Do you have a friend of yours that's also a fan? Are you solo here? What's it like for you?
Well, I've converted my family, my wife and two kids, so they're my Panthers Panthers fans friends. Back in the days when the seasons were rough, it was kind of like, why are you cheering for a team that was like nothing? But when you had those Super Bowl years in 2003 and 2015, it was kind of like you had the last laugh, and you find lots of people. Obviously, with the Roaring Riot, starting and going really big, I did come out to a couple of their Angel City Riot. The Los Angeles chapter of the Roaring Riots, and check it out there. But usually I'm watching at home. Sometimes I get so wound up. I don't know if you're the same way, where I'm so nervous and I just want to like focus. And then I don't know if I'm fun to watch games with in public. It's definitely fun to watch games in person, but like at a bar or with a large group of people, I'm just like so like wound up and focused on the game. I don't know if like anybody like trying to talk to me or interact with me. I'm just focused on like every single moment of every single detail of the game.
Well, that's good, and I can tell by your tweets that you put forth. You know a lot about Carolina, of course, and we're always thankful for that, for you sharing your insight and everything. I want to get into the fact about the schedule coming out here in the last couple days. Before I do that, though, let's talk about the main topic of our show here. Is we all are kind of happy and appreciative of the draft. We like our draft picks, and you can talk a little bit about that as well. But is the goal to really not do too well here in the 2020 season, so that we can have a high first round pick and perhaps target Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence? Are you in favor of that process of tanking at all, or do you just want to win every game?
It's a good question. I mean, we could go back and forth on this. There was a good article that came out that said that the Panthers were too good, or they added too many pieces over the offseason, so now they're too good to tank for Trevor. I think tanking is always, it's not binary. It's not yes or no. I think there's a middle ground here. I think that's where most fans are, but because it's Twitter, because it's social media, everybody wants to just go straight to the extremes, like no, we shouldn't tank, or yes, we should tank. Obviously, there's a team consists of like over 50 players, a staff, people's livelihoods are on the line. So it's not like they're going to come to the game and just like lay down, Yeah. So tanking, I feel like is a perception in our eyes. I think what Panthers fans want is just a really good product. And so if that means people develop and they lose and they get good players, or that means that they're promising and they do well, that's what the Panther fans want. I mean, for me personally, Trevor Lawrence or any quarterback, like I don't want to put all my eggs in that basket. Maybe they don't get Trevor Lawrence. Maybe you get Trevor Lawrence and he's not as great as you think it is. And you lost all those games for nothing. So you wasted all that time. And so I think what really I want is a team that has the promise that's getting better. In an ideal world, I'd love for them to like be really good, but lose by a point or two. I know you talked about the prediction out there that the Panthers would go 0-16, but would lose a couple games or a few games by very close. I think that would be promising. And then they could get a quarterback. And the way that like rosters are constructed, I think you cannot win in this league without a quarterback. And so if Teddy Bridgewater is the guy and he's awesome, like I'm happy with that. I don't need Trevor Lawrence. If Teddy Bridgewater is not that great, then like let's go and look in the draft and get somebody who's going to be there because Teddy Bridgewater hasn't had a full season yet. We don't know what he's like. He had a great 5 games run at this in New Orleans at the Saints. But I just want a real legit quarterback, and they don't have to be the first, second round. Patrick Mahomes was not the first pick. Jimmy Garoppolo, these Super Bowl quarterbacks, Tom Brady, they were not first round, the number one pick. We know Cam was the number one pick, but we just want a really good quarterback. Dak Prescott's a really good quarterback out there. So long story short is like, I just want a good team. I want a good quarterback. If you're going to tank, I always think it's bad karma. Like if you think you're going to suck or you think you're going to be terrible, we want something to cheer for. And, back in the days, even when we weren't that terrible, like we were playoff, we barely made the playoffs as a 7-9 team. I think people said like, well, what's the point? We might as well just tank. But like good culture, good karma, people feeling good about the team, making a playoff game does wonders for your fan base and gets you excited, gets you thinking about free agents and what to do. But having a stinky team that's terrible and then you don't get a good quarterback, ask the Browns, ask some of these teams that tank every year or quote unquote tank every year. Right. And it's not fun either.
Yeah, and you made some excellent points there. And, I kind of feel the same way. I'm an optimist, and I will pull for them every week. I hope they win. I don't want to see them lose. I mean, who does? Mm-hmm. If you want to see them lose, then you're not really a fan. You're not really pulling for your team. And, I kind of look at the situation kind of like what Miami was last year, right? Where everyone thought, they're going to tank and they're going to try and get Tua. And this was, of course, before Tua Tagovailoa got hurt. I think he was the premier quarterback and to be thought of as the top quarterback in the draft. And here's Miami. They get Ryan Fitzpatrick in there, right? Kind of as a stopgap quarterback, and here they come off with more wins than you would think. Would they have 6 wins, something along those lines? But so yeah, I'm with you. I hope that they play well. I hope that they win. I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them lose. And so now the question is, well, is Carolina just good enough to, win a couple, 5 or 6 games? I'm putting the bar kind of low there, but can they win 5 or 6 games and, not necessarily be in line for the top pick? I just want to see them play. I want to see them win. And I totally agree with your perspective on that. So,
I think everybody out there wants just to see football in general, but nobody wants the team that they like to lose. I was also thinking about the 2010 Panthers when they went 1-15 and they drafted Cam the next year. Like, not that it was close, but if they had drafted Blaine Gabbert or one of those, those went a different direction, went Andy Dalton. Sure. Obviously, we think very differently about tanking, but I think also in our minds is that like we sucked, we got Cam Newton, and like we had this great 10-year run, and so I also think that our perception might be a little clouded because it went really well for us once, and so let's do it one more time and run it back.
Yeah. So, I'm with you there. Let's shift gears a little bit. Talk about the schedule release. I'd love to do a full show on this just to kind of go over each individual game. We don't necessarily have time for that, but we can kind of get a little bit of a high level overview. Our buddy Mike Clay with ESPN, I saw a tweet that he sent out where it had projections of every game for every team, in every week. And, I'm looking at it, week 1, week 3, week 7, week 12. I'm looking at the Carolina scores and who he's got. And he doesn't have Carolina winning a single game. He hasn't gone 0-16. And I'm thinking, what, Mike? Come on now. But looking at their schedule, right, they open up with Las Vegas. The Raiders come here. And that might actually be their most winnable game. I think the line is a pick 'em, or it might, it might change like a point or a half a point or so. But looking at the Raiders, what's your thought there, right there, just on the first game? What do you think? And you know how winning is kind of contagious, and it's always good to get a head start and put forth a good effort for the next week. And they've got a decent offense. They've got some playmakers. They've got weapons. They have Christian freaking McCaffrey, right? Who's just so awesome to watch. But and Teddy Bridgewater, who hasn't lost a game until since his last start was 2016, maybe. But there's a chance. There's definitely a chance. Right. What's your take on their chance here, week 1 against the Raiders?
Yeah, when I first looked at at home. So I was looking at the schedule and I was like, you know what? It's funny that we were first. All the hot rumors are that they were going to be at Kansas City for the season opener. I bought into those rumors, and then it's like, oh, instead it's at home against Las Vegas. Like, wow, of all the games on the schedule, that might be the one that you pencil in and say the best chance to win might be this one. I think you're looking at it. They're at home. People can argue, and maybe there's a good argument either way that Teddy Bridgewater is kind of the better quarterback than what the Raiders have. For me, when I try to predict games, I try to look at the quarterback, like we talked about, and say which team has a better quarterback, and I want to lean in that direction. And there's other factors. And so I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is that much worse than if it's Carr or Mariota. And then I think about it, it's the first week. And so the Panthers are putting in a brand new offense, a brand new defense, new staff, new players. And so what tape is out there for the Raiders to game plan for? They have no idea what this defense looks like, what Joe Brady's going to put out there. And so I'm thinking, if there's anybody that can surprise, it'd be week 1, the Panthers, because the Raiders would have no idea how to prepare. We have no idea if they're even going to play the game, but if they do play this game, that's the game where you look at it and you're like, hey, better quarterback, they're at home, and nobody knows what the game plan's going to look like. That's true, and it's kind of difficult to plan for a team like that, to prepare as far as the Raiders are concerned. But also, let's talk about this. What if there's nobody in the stands? What if it's what if they're playing without a crowd? I don't know if it would get to that extreme, but that's possible. It's hard for me to fathom what the NFL and NFL Sunday and NFL Sunday opening day is going to be like. Well, of course, the Thursday night game, which starts us off, but what that would be like without fans. And is there any home field advantage anymore as a result of that? There's a lot of questions still to be answered in that regard. And who knows? This is definitely going to be a unique season, I think. Yeah, I was listening on the radio for WFNZ yesterday, and they were talking about there was these plans for possibly only limiting 15 to 20,000 in Bank of America Stadium. So even if they did that, they're talking about how do you pick who gets to go in, where do they sit, what if they're your family, how do you get through the stadium without distancing? And so that's definitely a possibility where there could be no fans, little fans. Is there a home field advantage? I think there'll be a slight home field advantage because Las Vegas has to travel across the country. I don't even know where their home is, and so they'll have that advantage. But with nobody cheering for you and it's just dead silent, it could be a neutral site for all intents and purposes. Yeah, and just a real quick overview on the schedule. After week 2, they've got Tampa Bay and Tom Brady in Tampa. Not too much to talk about there, except that, that of course that's going to be a big game for them. It's their home opener, Tom Brady's home opener with the Bucs. Then they're on the road against the Chargers, your hometown. Yep. Are there going to be fans there? With the Chargers. And then they're home for Arizona, and then they're on the road at Atlanta, home for Chicago. They don't even have a back-to-back home game until week 10, which is a little unfortunate, but still.
I don't want to get too much into the schedule here. We're going to have a show where we just talk about that. But I do want to mention, though, the Week 16 game against Washington and Ron Rivera. Who do you think has – well, are you thinking that Rivera has a little bit more knowledge on the Panthers or is it vice versa? Because it's kind of hard to tell because this is going to be a completely different team, a different offense, different defense. However, Carolina and their players are going to be familiar with Rivera's tactics and such. I'm just kind of curious, looking at that game, who has the advantage there, do you think?
I definitely say like the coach would have the advantage because I know the players know the coach, but he's known these players, and knows what their tendencies are and et cetera. We have a new regime in Carolina, and so who knows what they can incorporate or what they could, conjure up based on what their former players will say. But I think about that game, I forgot which Super Bowl it was, but it was Tampa Bay versus the Raiders in the Super Bowl, and it wasn't fair because John Gruden knew, the team like the back of his hand, and also like there's something to be said about revenge games. And I don't believe in jinxes, but if I had to believe in a jinxes, I feel like revenge games are always that. And so I have a feeling that this game will mean more to Ron Rivera than this game will mean for the players against Ron Rivera.
Yeah. And I can see that too as well. And the Panthers know all about revenge games with Steve Smith, of course, with the Ravens going after him. Heck, even Calvin Benjamin had a decent revenge game against the Panthers. That preseason game where he just thought it was like his Super Bowl, which was, whatever.
Which actually, it might, if you think of his career, it might be.
Yes, it probably was. Anyway, bygones. I want to talk to you about our draft picks and just an overview, if we can, about our draft. The decision to take Derek Brown over Isaiah Simmons. Was that your pick? Are you on board with it? Were you expecting that?
Yeah, actually, I've usually around February I try to put out like a list of predictions of what the Panthers did in the offseason, and I was completely wrong this year. I thought they were gonna hire Eric Bieniemy. I thought they were gonna go, re-sign Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, run it all back. So everything I said was wrong. But the one thing I got right was that I think that the Panthers are going to draft Derek Brown. For me, I was bummed because I wanted Isaiah Simmons. He was, from Clemson. He's this athletic beast, and Derek Brown is, considered a run stuffer. And so the more that the draft went on, and I got to like actually watch a few of Derek Brown's games, I think one thing that I noticed is that that when they got Jeremy Chin, I was like, okay, that eases the blow of not getting Isaiah Simmons because you got something a little bit lighter, but less of the price. For me, Derek Brown, I haven't written about this or talked about this yet, but like I feel like his ceiling would be like a star Latolele. So for the newer ones, that he used to be paired with K'Wan Short. And I think about the projection of Star. When he first came out, he was as highly touted, was supposed to be top 10, had a heart condition, and he fell to the Panthers, and everybody just went ecstatic. It's like, oh, we got this amazing stud defensive tackle. And his first 2 years, you look at his stats. It's nothing to nothing go crazy. Nobody's going to think Star is going to be headed to the Hall of Fame. He doesn't get more than 3 or 4 sacks, but he has these like splash plays here and there. Right. And what he really became was he made K'Wan Short. He made Luke Kuechly. And then when Star was out or when he left for Buffalo, you could see how the defense kind of like crumbled. And so I was disappointed in that you didn't get a star, like a stud that was just like, this is an elite player. Right. It's almost like you invested in a guy that's going to make your elite players better. And so guys like Shaq, guys like Brian Burns and K'Wan Short, that's who you expect to have an uptick in production because now you have Derek Brown who you got a double team. You can't push him around as easily. I know like his pass rush could use some more finesse and technique and more than just a bull rush. But at the very least, he's taking on blockers that free up a guy like, Tahir Whitehead, Shaq Thompson, and even on the outside, like guys like Brian Burns. And so that's what you're hoping for, a best case scenario. But if you're expecting a guy to be like this 10-digit sack guy or whatever, I think we're going to be very disappointed. And I think you just if you expect like a Star Latolele type career, I think we'll all be very happy.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to look at it. And some people compared him to Fletcher Cox. And, of course, Fletcher Cox is a very dynamic player, a defensive tackle who can also get sacks. And, that's something that's rare to find these days. We'll see. And I like your notion about, kind of expecting a little bit less. And if he gives you more, hey, all the power to him. So, yeah, I'm with you there. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if we were expecting Fletcher Cox, if we're expecting Aaron Donald or guys like that, I think people are gonna be like, "Oh man, that would have wasted a pick." But if you expect somebody like Starr, somebody that could make other players great, I think fans will be happy. I think I got a lot of heat on that night for Twitter because I was so disappointed. But I got to watch it. I watched his LSU game, so I was thinking about like, oh, Joe Brady was coaching at LSU. He must have watched this, and he just wrecked a couple of their drives, just completely messed them up, like back-to-back plays. And he didn't have a sack or wasn't anything crazy. He had that famous sack where he threw an offensive lineman to sack Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
But other than that splash play, like he was constantly messing up plays. And so like the worst thing you could do is get that internal pressure. And so I could imagine them, the Panthers, Joe Brady, Matt Rhule looking at this as like, man, we need this or else like the rest of the defense won't look as good unless we get that interior pressure.
And of course, starting with the trenches is definitely a good place to start. And we knew that they needed defensive support, especially against the run. So maybe excluding Derek Brown, or maybe you can tell me it's Brown, but is there any particular draft pick that you are just so excited about? You can't wait to see him. You want to see him develop. He's got the skills and the technique all there. He just kind of needs to put it all together and show on a national level here that what he can accomplish. Is there any particular player that stands out to you like that?
Yeah, well, first I put down Brown because like I can't wait to see him lined up with K'Wan Short, with Brian Burns, and see them wreak havoc in that sense. For me, like my quote unquote draft crush going in was Jeremy Chin because he was like 99th percentile. The Panthers have never invested in a super, a lot of money or high draft pick in a safety type. And so that they not only highly invested in one, but one that's like at the 99th percentile of athleticism. And also knowing a little bit about Phil Snow, the defensive coordinator's, style of moving people and doing this weird scheme where people can fit down as a slot safety or a linebacker or transition back up as a single high safety. I'm just excited to see what they do with him because if you just waste him as just like a safety that you just put out there, then why would you trade up for this guy? And so I'm just excited to see what they use him for. I don't want to be disappointed, but I do want to see like, hey, you got this ball of athleticism, this ball of clay that you could make awesome. And so what are you going to do with him? Because he's obviously your guy. You obviously went up and got him. So let's see what plans you have for him. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are excited to see that. And also Kenny Robinson too. I really liked what I saw with his story, how he's coming back from, some adversity he's going through, of course. And just the fact that he's already had an opportunity in the XFL to kind of make a name for himself. And he's kind of showed that 21 tackles, 1 sack, and 2 interceptions. I'll take that. Bring that to the NFL, please.
I mean, his ceiling is like a ball hawking safety you could just leave in the middle center field. And the Panthers haven't had that for a while. And when they do, it's been terrible. I know Panthers fans don't like the name of Haruki Nakamura, but those are the type of safeties that we've trotted out there. And have been terrible. So I'd love to see Kenny Robinson be that guy that can just fill every lane and just, be a ball hawk.
That's right. Let's see the pressure up against Matt Ryan, and Matt throws an errant pass. Boom, interception. I want to see that. That's on my plan.
Let's go.
So let's play right now. Bring on September. Let's talk about the offensive line because there's been a revamping here of the offensive line with 3 new players, 3 new starters. You've got Russell Okung, who came over in the trade for Trey Turner from the Chargers. John Miller is going to play left guard. Looks like Matt Paradis. I can't say his name. Paradis. Excuse me. At center. Right, you got Schofield as the right guard, which they just acquired, and Taylor Moton at right tackle. So you've got Miller, Schofield, and Okung as the newcomers here to the offensive line, and you've got, of course, you got Greg Little too as a backup at left tackle. Talk to me a little bit about the offensive line. What you think of where it's at right now? I kind of give it like if we were to let's say grade all of the offensive lines in the NFL, I don't see that as like a bottom 10 offensive line. I kind of see that right around maybe like 18, 19, 20-ish or so. There's a little bit of cohesion there, and there's also some talent. And, I'm just kind of curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at maybe this makes for good radio or podcasting, but like I always like going where the extreme isn't. And so I know people like to crap on the Panthers offensive line and be like, man, it's actually not so bad as I thought it would be, And so
Mhm.
I wrote down a couple things that, why I think they could be better than we expect. And first is continuity. And so the new guy like Schofield and Russell Kuhn, like I played together. They've had the same coach for the last couple of years. So there's familiarity there. And so every time you get people that the same system and they know who's there actually helps. And I think about the 2015 year when people thought, we hated the offensive line, but they were good enough to make the Super Bowl. Like they just had the consistency of knowing each other. The starters played a lot of snaps together and stayed relatively healthy all the way through the Super Bowl. And so if they can stay healthy, I think they're not so bad. And the second thing is the system. And so, Teddy Bridgewater likes to, the knock on him is that he doesn't try the long ball and likes these short passes. He has Christian McCaffrey. And so one way to also make this offensive line look a little bit better in terms of pass protection is don't hold the ball too long. And so I know Cam used to hold the ball, which is great. He held the ball in the pocket so long. He'd try to find, he wouldn't try to take off right away, but he'd like to stay in the pocket as long as possible and find a bomb down the field or whatever. And so having somebody like Teddy Bridgewater that's just like wants to like either get it out quickly or throw it away, or it'll make the offensive line look a lot better than it could be.
Yeah, and also too, as far as Bridgewater is concerned, he's got that familiarity with John Miller from his days in Louisville, which is always good. Like as you said, cohesion and kind of being together.
There's one more thing I wanted to mention too, is that one thing that Joe Brady, when he was with the Saints and the Saints currently now, one of the stats that they're highest in the league in is using 6 offensive linemen. And so I'm curious to see if the Panthers are going to use the 6 offensive linemen. They've brought in a lot of these guys like Miller, Daly, Schofield, like just a lot of these interior guys. Larson is still there. And so what also could help this offensive line, if they be creative and use these 6-man packages at the offensive line, I think we could be it'd be very interesting. And I think the protection both for the run and the pass can be really fun to watch.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be all the time, just for like certain plays and such. I'm with you there. I'd love to see it. I can't wait to watch Joe Brady and his offense at work. So speaking about coaches, we've seen Matt Rhule. He seems like he's such a great person to listen to in his press conferences. And, I can't imagine being a player wanting to play for him. It seems like it's a very exciting time for the players. I mean, as a fan, I'm excited, but what are you pleased about so far from what you've seen out of Matt Rhule?
Well, Matt Rhule, what I like about him is that he has a history of taking terrible franchises or teams and building it up. And so what you don't want is a guy, especially since The Last Dance is out, people relate Phil Jackson to give him a championship team and he could take the really elite and move them up one level to getting a championship. And what Matt Rhule is known for is taking nothing and building it into something. The question still out there is, can he take that something and make it even farther into a championship team? But at the very least, he has a track record of taking something, making something out of nothing. And so what I really like about the Panthers is that they've given him, the 7-year contract. They've given him free reign for his coaching staff. They hired a new player personnel guy yesterday that has ties to Matt Rhule, Pat Stewart. And so if this bombs, it was all on Matt Rhule. But I like that he had the freedom to kind of like make this his own, because what you don't want to have is you take a college guy and you try to like mix and match, or like, I'm going to put my own guys, or these guys have all experience. So let's just see what this crazy, wild science experiment looks like and give him the reins, because he had the history of doing it. So why not let him try again, but at the NFL level?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'm excited to see what he can do with Carolina. It seems like he's that type of coach that you target for exactly the situation that they're in. And kudos to David Tepper for making that hire.
Another thing that's really interesting to me too, I forgot to mention, sorry, Jeff, was that these guys that know Matt Rhule that have come back. So guys like Robbie Anderson, Tahir Whitehead, PJ Walker, they had other options that could have gone elsewhere. But because they chose this particular coach, this particular person, that I'm like, dude, this must be a guy that has great relationships with his players, because if these guys didn't come back to the Carolina or didn't want to choose Matt Rhule, it says something about your coach. And so it says a lot that these guys have decided to play for him when they had different options to choose.
Yeah, and it sure seems like that. Like I said, I'm excited as a fan. I can't imagine what it's like to be a player getting ready to play for Matt Rhule. You mentioned a little bit earlier about Teddy Bridgewater and how if he comes on and he plays well, the sky's the limit as far as, what the future could mean for him. Here's a guy who got hurt his knee, was out for almost 2 years, trying to make a comeback, tried to do so with the Jets. Of course, that didn't really pan out. Signed with the Saints, finally got his opportunity when Drew Brees had a kind of a minor knee injury midway through the season last year. And all he did was win 5 straight games for the Saints. And he knows Joe Brady's system. I'm excited to see Teddy Bridgewater, what he can do. Yeah, he doesn't have that long ball, and he may not be the perfect fantasy type of quarterback, right? Who's going to win games with his arm, but maybe that's not really what's needed here in his role, or either that, or maybe he surprises us all, and in Joe Brady's offense, he takes off, and I think we all want to see that. Kind of looking at the future here. Where do you see Carolina here with the 2021 season? They got a lot of cap space, don't they?
Yeah. One of the things that, one thing that I'm curious about, because I always want to see what's happening in the division, is that Tampa Bay is putting together like this super team where they've got all these pieces and trying to put them together, and hopefully magic happens. Mm-hmm. But in real life, like, super teams just aren't created. So I remember back in the day when the Eagles created this super team, or Cleveland had this super team last year, and they just don't pan out because a football team is literally a team, and the cohesion, the chemistry, those type of things are what builds a championship team. And so I look at the Panthers, and depending on how this season goes, if they're already close to a championship, I could see them pulling pieces with all that cap space in 2021 and, filling in the spots. Obviously they need a corner. Obviously they could use some interior O-line help. Obviously we still don't know what they're going to do with Curtis Samuel. But if this is still a long, slow build under Matt Rhule, I could see them still doing the same kind of approach to free agency like they did this year, picking and choosing young players, short-term contracts, whatever, and building through the draft, because they're the type of team that wants to build this culture. They want to build this identity. They're building a team that everybody knows each other, knows the system, or they fit a certain system. And so I can't imagine them kind of breaking the bank for some random guy that doesn't fit their system, or they don't know them, or don't know anything. And so I could see them still being prudent next year in free agency and spending big if they're getting close, or threatening for a playoff or a Super Bowl berth.
Yeah, spending big later on, and this is kind of a stepping stone season for that. I agree with you there, and it seems like that's what they're doing, is they're setting themselves up for the future, and we'll see exactly who's involved in that future. Cap space is kind of small right now, but maybe they could sign one other or two other pieces. I'd like to see them get a veteran corner to come in. Any thoughts there at all on your end? Is there any particular player that you think that they could sign?
I mean, there's players that I'd want for them to sign, but I have no idea what this. They haven't signed one yet, so I don't know what their philosophy is in terms of signing, a splashy free agent or even a cornerback. I was thinking about possible names. I think it'd be no surprise to anybody. Not a cornerback, but a linebacker, Hassan Reddick, who was a top 15 pick. Played at Temple for Matt Rhule. Didn't get his 5th year option exercised by the Cardinals, and so he'll be a free agent next year. So that's the only one I was looking at the list for 2021. I was like, this is the only one I could put for certain that is going to be on the Panthers' radar. Everybody else is either somebody that's not that good, or I don't know if the Panthers are willing to invest so much on this guy if they're just like a rebuilding team.
Right. Yeah, and he didn't necessarily pan out with Arizona, but he kind of has that same mentality of, kind of being a roving type of linebacker / safety / defensive end, rusher as well. I mean, he could do it all. But things just didn't really pan out for him. And maybe it's just not the right scheme, but hey, if he played well with Rhule in the past, perhaps he can, kind of be reborn. But we don't really have a whole lot of time. I know you got to get going, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight. It's great to have you on and talking Panthers. We got to get together, I think, if you're interested, and do that show on the schedule, and we can do that in the future. But
yeah, Jeff, I'd love to. Awesome.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I'll let you get back to your evening. Enjoy the weekend. You know what? I need a haircut, man. This whole pandemic, this whole situation is rough. I can't imagine people who were late to get a haircut, right before everything went down, and they're like, "Oh no, now it's really bad." Might have to get the scissors out. Anyway, but I appreciate you coming on. Fandom, we appreciate you watching and listening, and hopefully you were able to learn something. We are a live podcast, video podcast, and we're live every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. So please tune in, and if you haven't subscribed, and if you subscribe, click that bell. That bell lets you know when we are on. So thanks so much, and Edgar, it's great meeting you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right.
Stay safe and stay healthy.
Thanks, man. You too.